Turning to other news now, new polling data says the race between leaders Justin Trudeau and Andrew Scheer is neck and neck, with less than 3 months until Canadians cast their vote. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by Geoghegan. He is a political strategist. He's based out of Victoria, British Columbia. He joins me from Williams Lake, BC. Good afternoon to you.
Thanks for having me.
So let's taking a look at polls, and you and I have talked about polls over and over again, and we're still, months away from this election, weeks of campaigning still to take place. How much stock would you say, Michael, that we need to put in these polls? I mean, do we really need to be looking at them, or is this something really that the parties are paying a lot of attention to?
Well, the political parties are certainly paying a lot of attention to these polls. And I think what it does is it kind of gives Canadians a sense of where the parties basically are at in terms of their level of support. And, for instance, the polling numbers suggest that the Liberals and the Conservatives are in a pretty close to a neck-and-neck race. So that's going to make for a very interesting fall election.
And it's, of course, not a position that the Prime Minister wants to be in. He wants to have those polls show that he's got a healthy lead rather than, as we're seeing this tight race here. So what do you think the strategy is going to be on the Liberals' part?
Well, I think it's going to be twofold. Obviously, they want to win back as many people that voted for them last time. They also want to try and scare Canadians in terms of, Scheer is going to be, Harper 2.0 and that kind of thing, try and tie Scheer into, somehow with like what Republicans are doing in the States, all those sorts of things. And of course, what Doug Ford's been doing in Ontario. So there's going to be a lot of negative campaigning on the Conservative side. They're going to do a lot of negative campaigning as well in terms of what's happened in the oil and gas sector, what's happening in terms of where the economy's headed. So I think it's going to be quite a negative campaign. The one advantage that Trudeau has over Scheer, however, is he's much more likely in a minority government situation to get the support of NDP or Green MPs than Scheer is. So he's got that added level of comfort.
And speaking of the Greens and the NDP, that poll also showing the Greens in third place and the NDP dropping well into fourth place. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, I mean, when they elected him leader, this was someone that they saw who was, who had a certain Trudeau-like presence in the sense that, he'd been on the cover of GQ magazine and stuff like that. But as leader, he's really failed to catch on with Canadians. And meanwhile, I think with the Green Party having had limited successes at the federal and provincial level, I think a lot of people now are going, if they can't decide between the Liberals and the Conservatives, they're like, let's park our vote with the Greens. And also with growing concerns about climate change and the impact it's having on our environment, a lot of other people are saying, hey, let's park our vote with the Greens.
Before I have to let you go, Michael, I want to talk to you about the changes the government announced to drug prices, cutting them down, dropping that price comparison, if you will, between the U.S. and Switzerland. Their prices being the highest here. What do you make of that, and how that, because the government's talking about it's going to save Canadians, billions of dollars here. What do you make of that move? And of course, it is an election year, so they're looking for brownie points everywhere they can get it.
Well, in this case, I think the brownie points are well deserved. We've seen horrific news stories out of the United States, young people with type 1 diabetes dying because they can't afford insulin, that is where the prices have been jacked up to the point where they're 10 times as much as what Canadians pay. And this is because Americans in their rigged system, they don't negotiate with drug companies. They can charge whatever they like. Whereas Canada, I think very wisely, says, hey, we'll give you patent protection, but if your prices exceed a certain level, that patent protection is gone. It essentially, it's illegal. So there's no negotiation. It's bringing down the rule of law on these big pharmaceutical companies, and I think a lot of Americans envy us in that regard.
Well, yeah, because we see many of them, as you mentioned, crossing the border here to buy their drugs here. And what's also interesting is that the board will also be considering the drug's value and the financial impact it will have on consumers in the health system, which is huge because, we know what that is like. Quickly, though, Michael, do you think we're going to be hearing something more from the Liberals on this, officially a pharmacare plan announcement in the coming weeks?
I think there's a significant possibility. The other issue is going to be if Americans can now start accessing Canadian pharmaceuticals, what is that going to do in terms of our supply? So that's another thing, that issue that's going to have to be addressed Canada might have to look at sourcing medications from various locales and not just what we've done before.
We will keep a close eye on those developments. Michael Geoghegan, always a pleasure. Thanks a lot, Michael.
Thank you.